Warned not to touch him. She does it anyway. A fist closed for 7 years gives way under her fingers, knuckles the color of old paper, a grip that forgot it was ever meant to hold anything real. No looking up from him. Never once. Yet his hand moves against her palm all the same, once, twice, a third time, so faint the mind wants to argue it away, and for the rest of the night there is no putting down the question of what a heartbeat sounds like when it is finally asking permission to start again. If you've ever taken care of someone who couldn't say thank you and did it anyway, you already know why I'm still here. Stay a while. This one's for you. The car dies twice on the way there, both times met with a voice low and even, the same one due out again in 3 hours on a man who has forgotten how to answer anyone. On file at the gate is a name, Tyla Williams, temporary staff. Background cleared. 4 minutes pass before the guard finds it, long enough for the cold to work through her coat and into the bone underneath. Des Moines in January does not forgive anyone for being poor. Wind off the river finds every seam in her jacket, cutting through wool that used to feel warmer than this. Ahead, the tower rises out of the flat dark like something that was never meant to belong here, glass stacked on glass, a crown of gold light where the old money lives. Houses like this she has cleaned before. Never one this tall, and never one where the lobby smells faintly of orange oil and something colder underneath it, a metallic note she cannot place until later. No buttons in the elevator. Only a card reader, a keypad, and a small brass plate engraved with a single letter, M, worn soft at the edges from 100 years of thumbs. This is just a paycheck, she tells herself, in the gate line, in the driveway, in the mirrored box carrying her upward past floors she will never see again, still telling herself when the doors open onto marble polished, so clean it throws her own reflection back up at her, tired and underdressed and entirely out of place. A single buzz sounds in her coat pocket. Voicemail from the landlord, the third this week, the kind she has learned to let go straight to a folder she does not open. Turning around is still possible. Back down the elevator, into a car that may or may not start, never learning what any of this costs her. She does not turn around. It is the money, she tells herself, and the lie is already out before she can stop it, some small, stubborn part of her aware of exactly what it is. He is waiting for her. Introductions do not come right away. Hands loose at his sides, dressed the way men dress, when they have never once had to think about what clothes cost. He stands in the archway and watches her the way she imagines a man watches weather rolling in off open ground, waiting to see which direction it is going to break. "You're late," he says. Your gate guard needed 4 minutes to read a name off a list. Something moves at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. Closer to the memory of one. Joseph Mancini, he says, like the name should mean something to her, and when it clearly does not, his shoulders loosen a fraction, as though he would rather she not know it at all. "Tyla," she says. "I'm here for my father." He catches himself. "For my father's care." No question asked about the slip. It gets filed away instead quietly, the way everything does for later. Without slowing down, he walks her through the apartment, and she has to lengthen her stride to keep pace. Portraits line the hallway, generations of Mancini men with the same pale eyes, the same stillness in how they hold their hands, and somewhere past the third one, the counting stops, because they have started to feel less like decoration and more like witnesses standing guard over a silence none of them chose. For caretakers before her, he tells her, flat, like he is reading off an inventory. All gone inside, 3 weeks. What happened to them? Nothing happened to them, not looking back at her. He just makes people leave. He has never needed to raise a hand to do it. You think I'll be different then? I think you're broke enough to stay past the point it stops being worth it. No cruelty in how he says it, which makes it land harder. There is also a family asking questions about us lately. Ashcombe. If anyone unfamiliar approaches you about my father or this house, you tell me. Immediately. Am I in danger, Mr. Mancini? Everyone in this house is in danger. You are simply the only one who gets paid for it. Did any of the four ask that question? Two of them did. A fact filed away long ago, no weight left in it for him to carry. The other two didn't stay long enough to think of it. No joke in how he says it and none taken. A cup of coffee already waits on the hall table outside his father's door, steam still lifting off it, though she never asked and never told anyone she takes it black. She notices and says nothing. He notices her noticing and says nothing either. At a set of doors twice her height, they stop. His hand does not reach for the handle right away. He hasn't spoken in 7 years, Joseph says. Not since my mother. The sentence goes unfinished. Silence does the rest of the work, and for the first time since she arrived, something underneath the money in his voice sounds closer to a boy standing outside a room he is afraid to walk into. Nothing about the cold in this room has to do with the weather outside. Heavy drapes hold back the last of the daylight. Somewhere a clock keeps time no one in the room seems to be living by. Near the window, in a chair built for a body that has stopped fully trusting itself, silver-haired, still as the portraits in the hall, sits a man with one hand curled into a fist in his lap around nothing at all. Before deciding to, she crosses the room. Kneeling in front of him, the way she used to kneel in front of her own father, back when there was still a father to kneel in front of, she does not ask permission. Her hands wrap around his fist, gently, the way a person holds something that has been closed for so long it has forgotten it is allowed to open. He does not look at her. He never does, not once, not for the rest of the evening. His fingers move against her palm anyway. Once. Twice. A third time. So light the mind could talk itself out of believing it happened at all, except that behind her, Joseph goes completely still in the doorway, the way a house goes still right before a storm decides which direction to break. Faint orange oil still hangs in the air, the same note from the lobby, and underneath it, that same cold metallic thread she still cannot place, older than the building itself, it seems, though that cannot possibly be true. He hasn't done that, Joseph says, in longer than you've been alive. No turning around. Her hands stay where they are, around a fist that is, for the first time in 7 years, not quite as closed as it was a minute ago, and somewhere behind her ribs, the part of her that came here strictly for the money refuses to agree with that anymore. Don't let him break you, Joseph says quietly from the doorway, and it takes a moment to hear the second half of it, the part he does not say out loud. The part that sounds, listen for, less like a warning and more like a man asking her, without asking, not to leave. Long after his footsteps fade down the hall, long after the light outside the window turns from gold to nothing at all, she stays kneeling. The old man's hand has gone still again, closed the way it was when she walked in, and she tells herself that is all it was, a reflex, a trick of the body a doctor could explain in a single sentence if she asked. No asking. She sits with him in the dark a while longer than the job requires, listening to the buildings settle around them both, and when she finally rises to leave, the decision has already been made without her quite choosing it, that tomorrow she is coming back. By the third morning, the drive to the tower has already stopped feeling like a decision. It feels like a habit forming faster than trust allows. A competence, she tells herself, is simply what this looks like, showing up on time, learning a house the way she has learned every other house that paid her, but competence has never before made her check her reflection in the elevator doors before stepping out of them. The routine settles quickly. Vitals get taken without asking permission because asking gets her silence, and taking gets her tolerance, and tolerance is the only currency he spends. Drapes get adjusted an inch at a time until the light lands where he seems to prefer it, though he has never once told her where that is. Weather has taught her how to read a storm before it breaks, and now this room teaches the same lesson in a language made of nothing but stillness, settling differently, depending on what is coming. Tucked beneath ledgers no one has touched in years, the photographs turn up in a drawer she was not looking in. Black and white, a study that used to hold more books than it does now, a chest set by the window, a woman's shawl draped over the same chair his son now avoids sitting in. An entire afternoon goes into putting the room back the way the pictures remember it. The chess set returned to its corner, The drapes hung the old way instead of the way some decorator chose after nobody was left to object. Keeping her hands busy, she tells herself. Her hands know better. One more thing to fix keeps turning up long after the room is finished. He watches her do it. Not the way a man watches a task he cares about, but the way an animal watches weather, aware of it, unmoved by it, until the chess set goes back into its corner and something in his face changes, so slightly it is almost missed. His head turns, not toward her, toward the far wall, past the bookshelves, toward a narrow door assumed, until now, to lead to a closet, one with no handle on this side, only a keyhole gone dark with age. His whole arm reaches for it, trembling with the effort, stretching toward a door he cannot possibly open from 6 feet away in a chair that will not carry him there on its own. She crosses the room and gently lowers his arm back into his lap, and he lets her, though his eyes stay on the door the way a man's eyes stay on a door when he is waiting for someone who is never coming through it again. No question asked about it. Questions she has learned already get her nothing, and Alfred Mancini answers to patterns, not curiosity. The door's location she remembers all the same. The exact angle of his reaching, aimed low and slightly left toward the servants' passage that runs behind the east wing, gets filed away in the same place everything goes that does not yet have a use. The next day it happens again, and the day after that, at almost the same hour, as though something in him keeps its own private clock separate from hers. The third time, she counts the seconds between when his hand rises and when it falls back, defeated, into his lap. 9 seconds. Always 9. By the fourth reach, her hand rests flat against her own sternum out in the hallway afterward, not because anything hurts, but because some part of her wants proof that whatever she is feeling is still contained where it belongs. Arms braced against the counter, staring at nothing in particular the way his father stares at the door, Joseph turns up in the kitchen that evening. Almost nothing gets said. Then something does. What's behind the locked door in the study? The one without a handle. Stillness answers before words do, telling her more than any sentence could. Nothing that concerns you. He reaches for it. Every day, almost the same time. Something crosses his face, there and gone before it can be named. That door hasn't opened since my mother died in that passage. Flat, the way a man says something he has practiced not reacting to. It stays locked. I'd like it to stay that way. No further explanation offered, none asked for, but the sentence sits in her chest the rest of the night like a stone swallowed without meaning to, too large to cough up and too heavy to ignore. How his mother died in a passage behind a locked door in her own son's house nearly gets asked outright. His cup lands harder on the counter than the moment calls for, knuckles whitening briefly around the handle before he notices and lets go, and the question gets set aside for a night when his hands are steadier than this one. By the third day, Alfred refuses the broth entirely. Not with force. With a stillness more absolute than any of his other silences, his mouth staying closed no matter how gently she offers, his eyes fixed on that door she now understands he has been trying to reach for longer than she has known him. The bowl gets set down. No forcing it, though the part of her that reads his charts knows she probably should. Alone in the hallway afterward, tray still warm in her hands, she lets herself stop performing composure for exactly as long as it takes to breathe once, slowly, all the way out. Faint orange oil hangs in the hallway, the same as the lobby, and beneath it, something colder still, something she now suspects has always been the smell of a house that lost someone and never finished grieving her. Her own small kitchen comes to mind, the sink that still drips no matter how many times she has tightened it. Bills stack in a folder still unopened. Clocking out would be easy, a drive home. Someone else left to worry whether an old man eats his broth or dies slowly refusing it in a room built for a woman who is never coming back, a room that has been waiting 7 years for someone to notice it is still waiting. She does not leave. A long moment passes, tray in her hands, the broth going from warm to lukewarm to nothing against her palms, and the admission comes quietly, in the particular voice used only when no one else can hear it, that somewhere between the chess set and the locked door, she has started caring whether he lives. Not for the money, not for the job. A better reason has not arrived yet, and she is honest enough with herself, finally, admitting as much out loud into the empty hallway, to stop pretending she needs one. If you've stayed this long, you already know what it costs to keep showing up for someone who can't thank you for it. There's more of this house left to walk through. Don't leave the light on without you. Into the tower with her comes the admission from the night before, carried like something she has to be careful not to spill. It sits low in her chest all morning, through the elevator, through the vitals, through the moment she catches herself humming while she straightens his collar, a habit not caught in herself since she was young enough to still have someone to hum for. Nothing changes, she tells herself. A job needs doing and a chart needs filling out, and a man will not eat, and none of that requires her to feel anything about him at all. Her hands disagree. Slower now, more careful than the paperwork requires. They move around him the way hands move around something they have decided, without permission matters. The chair is mid-adjustment, angled toward the window when it happens. 1 second his arm rests where it always rests, quiet, curled, asking nothing of anyone. The next, his hand closes around her wrist, so fast there is no time to flinch before the pain arrives, bone against bone, a grip carrying strength his body should not still own. Renata. His voice cracks around the name like something breaking that has been threatening to break for years. Renata, don't go through that door. Stillness answers, not from fear, though fear is there too, low and cold under her ribs. His eyes have found hers for the first time since this job began, and they are not seeing her at all. A woman dead longer than Tyla has been in Iowa looks back at him from wherever memory keeps her, and whatever is happening behind those eyes, he is living through it again in full, the way a body relives a fall long after the ground has already caught it. His grip tightens. Her pulse fights against the shape of his fingers, the bruise arriving before it has fully formed, a heat spreading under the skin that will be the color of a plum by morning. Behind her, the door to the hall opens, footsteps stopping short, Joseph's voice starting to say her name before it catches on something and goes quiet instead. No pulling away. Every animal instinct in her wants to, the part of any body that flinches from pain, but a decade of this work has taught her that pulling away from a frightened man only teaches his hands to hold tighter. Leaning in instead, close enough to smell the wool of his sweater and something older underneath it, cedar, dust, the ghost of a cologne no one has worn in this room for years, she does the opposite of every instinct telling her to run. Basta, she says. The word is not English. It was never meant to be. Kitchen tables carried it across a language she only half remembers now, her grandmother's voice using it over disagreements that could have turned sharp and never did, because that single word ended a fight before it became one. A husband who raised his voice too easily heard it. A daughter who slammed doors heard it too, always in the same flat, certain tone, never louder the second time than the first, a tone that made an entire kitchen believe her without needing to be told twice. Not since the funeral has she said it out loud, not since there was no one left who would understand it. Why this is the word arriving now, she cannot say for certain, except that some part of her recognized this as the same kind of moment her grandmother used to end. Enough. Not a command. A hand laid flat over something that needed, finally, to stop. His breathing catches. The grip on her wrist does not loosen right away. For 3 full seconds, nothing moves in the room at all. Not his hand, not her breath, not even the dust turning slow in the last light through the window. Her own pulse pounds in her ears, and beneath it, quieter, his, ragged and uneven, a rhythm fighting to remember how to be steady. Then his fingers open, not all at once, one at a time, like a fist that has forgotten the mechanics of its own release and has to relearn each joint separately. His hand falls back into his lap, and something happens in his face never seen there before, a kind of collapse that has nothing to do with muscle, the whole structure of him settling inward like a house finally allowed to stop holding its own roof up. The door draws his eyes. The same door. The one behind the bookshelves, the one without a handle on this side. The door, he says. His voice, wrecked and used, arrives one word at a time, each syllable climbing out from somewhere very deep before it reaches air. Not Renata's name this time. No memory wearing her face. His own voice, present, aimed at now. The door should have stayed locked. Not looking at Tyla when he says it. Past her his eyes travel, past the bookshelves, past 7 years of silence, at something only he can still see clearly. I told her it should have stayed locked. Joseph has not moved from behind her. Pressure in the air announces him before anything visible does, the way a storm makes itself known before the first drop falls. Turning her head just enough to see him, she finds something there that undoes her more completely than the bruise on her wrist ever could. Gone is the man who meets her at the elevator with his hands loose and his voice carved from something colder than stone. Braced against the doorframe with one hand like it is the only thing keeping him upright. He stands entirely still, his face open in a way she suspects he has not allowed himself to be in front of anyone in years, not staff, not guards, perhaps not even himself. His father's voice has not reached him since before whatever happened to make that door stay locked. 7 years of silence, and it breaks not for him, not for anything he has tried, but for a stranger who has been in this house a week and a half. Nobody speaks. The room holds the kind of quiet that comes after something enormous has finally been allowed to move, the kind that asks to be respected rather than filled. Right where she is, Tyla stays, her hand still resting lightly over Alfred's now open one, the bruise already blooming dark under her sleeve. The old man's face keeps her attention long enough that she does not watch Joseph cross the room toward them, though every step reaches her anyway, slow, uneven, a son walking toward a voice he thought he had already finished grieving. What this will cost either of them, this door just pried open a crack, remains unknown, and no answer is coming tonight, or maybe for many nights after this one. Sorry is not what she feels. Not being sorry frightens her more than the bruise ever could. Joseph does not reach them right away. 3 steps short, close enough that his breathing carries, but not close enough to touch either of them. He stops, as though some part of him is still deciding whether the voice he just heard was real or something grief finally invented to punish him. Nothing gets said. Alfred says nothing more either, his hand gone slack under Tyla's, his eyes drifting shut the way a man's eyes drift shut after carrying something heavy across a very long room. Within minutes he is asleep, chest rising steady, the door forgotten for now, though she doubts it will stay forgotten long. Another hour passes before she trusts herself to move. Her wrist has gone the color of a bad decision, for dark points rising under the skin, and more than once she catches Joseph looking at it without saying anything about it either. When she finally rises, her knees complain from the floor, and only then does she realize she has been kneeling so long her legs have gone half numb, a small, useless pain that feels almost like relief, something simple to focus on instead of everything else crowding behind it. Orange oil still hangs in the room the way it always does, and underneath it, that same cold note, faint but unmistakable now, though tonight it feels less like a mystery and more like a name she is starting to guess. Around midnight, the house goes quiet, the particular quiet of a place built for more people than currently live in it. 3 floors down waits the guest room she should be in, sheets still turned down from a maid who assumed she'd be sleeping there. Water is the reason she tells herself she is in the kitchen. Her feet know better. Toward the one room in this house where a light is still on, they carry her anyway. 2 glasses sit out at the counter where Joseph waits, an amber bottle open between them that he has not touched yet. No asking if she wants one. He pours it and slides it toward her the way a man does something he needs an excuse to be doing. He hasn't said a full sentence in 7 years, Joseph says, and the first one he manages is a warning about a door I've spent 7 years pretending doesn't exist. You knew he was trying to say something. You've known for days. I knew he reached for it.
I didn't know what it meant.
Turning the glass in his hand without drinking from it. I told myself it was habit. Muscle memory. A man reaching for a door because his body remembers a room even after his mind has stopped. And now I think he's been trying to tell someone for 7 years, and nobody in this house was patient enough to let him. Harder than he probably meant it to, the sentence lands. Something crosses his face, quick, gone before he can stop it. Something that looks less like anger and more like a man realizing he has failed at the one thing he was supposed to protect. No filling the silence that follows. Enough about this house has been learned by now to know some silences are not hers to end. The passage runs behind the east wing, he says finally. Servants used it 100 years ago, back when a house like this needed people invisible enough to move through it without being seen. It was sealed after my mother died there. I had the door locked myself. I never asked anyone to check whether the lock was the only thing keeping it sealed. Is it? Silence, longer than any answer would need to be, tells her more than the words that eventually come. There's an old service tunnel underneath it. It connects to the original foundation, before the tower was built up around the estate. Nobody's used it in decades. Nobody's supposed to know it exists. Setting the glass down without drinking. Except my father does. And if he remembers it clearly enough to reach for it every day for a week, I have to assume other people who grew up around this family remember it too. Ashcombe. No confirmation needed. The name sits between them on the counter like something neither of them wants to pick up first. Fear should be all she feels. Some of it is there, cold and distant, filed carefully next to the fear she has been managing since the day she took this job. In a kitchen too large for 2 people, though, watching a man who has spent every day since she arrived treating warmth like a liability, something else pushes up harder than the fear. Something that has nothing to do with locked doors or old tunnels or a rival family testing the edges of a house that isn't hers. You could have told me none of this 3 weeks ago, she says. Warned me what I was walking into. Would you have taken the job? Probably. Turning the glass in her own hand now, watching the light catch it. I needed the money more than I needed to be careful. Something in his face softens at that, not pity, closer to recognition. A man who understands exactly what it costs to need something more than you need to be careful. Most people who work in this house eventually learn they needed something else too, he says. They just don't always let themselves notice until it's too late to leave cleanly. Is that a warning, Mr. Mancini? It's an observation. A pause, longer than it needs to be, long enough that she counts 3 full breaths before he finishes it. Joseph is fine. Something in the kitchen settles that has nothing to do with temperature. He refills her glass without asking this time, and when his hand brushes hers passing it over, neither of them pulls away as quickly as either of them would have a week ago. He said a name. Joseph says quietly, Renata. I know. Nobody's said her name out loud in this house since the funeral.
Not me.
Not the staff. I made sure of it. Looking down at his own glass instead of at her. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear it again until he said it to someone else. Nothing to do with that except let it exist in the room without trying to fix it, the way she has learned, slowly, that most things in this house do not need fixing so much as they need someone willing to stay in a room while they are true. 2 glasses, 1 bottle, a warning neither of them names out loud yet. The kitchen holds them both in its quiet a while longer, the refrigerator humming its low, patient note in the background, and underneath all of it, something gentler than either of them expected, small and unhurried, sitting patient in the space between 2 people who have both spent years deciding warmth was a risk they could not afford. Not that night, and not the 3 nights after it, does either of them mention the brushed hand again, though she catches him noticing the space between their glasses each time she refills them, careful now, like a man recalibrating a distance he isn't sure he wants back. For the best, she tells herself. An entire week has gone into reorganizing a stranger's grief into something livable, and she does not need to be reorganizing her own on top of it. Not with the war gathering somewhere below the floor she still cannot see. Her hands, as usual, disagree. Reasons keep turning up to be in the kitchen after midnight. A mug left unwashed, a light left on, small excuses that fool no one, least of all her. Without anyone announcing it, the house changes shape around them. More men in dark coats along the perimeter, radios murmuring low against collars, cars idling at the gate that never used to idle there. No direct explanation offered. Everything nobody says out loud. She reads the way she has learned to read everything else in this house. Extra locks appear on doors that never needed them before. The kitchen staff stop leaving early, choosing instead to sleep in rooms usually left for guests who never come. Even the light through the tower's glass feels different at night now, watched rather than simply admired, and windows get walked past a little faster than they used to, though she would never admit that to anyone who asked. At the counter again on the fourth night, same seat, same posture, though tonight no bottle sits open between the glasses. Joseph stares at something on his phone with the particular stillness of a man who has read the same line 4 times without absorbing it once. No question asked about what it says. The kettle gets filled instead. "You don't have to do that," he says, not looking up. "I know. Strong, no sugar, a slice of lemon dropped in at the end instead of stirred through. The tea gets made the way her own father liked it, because he always said sugar in tea was a decision made by someone who had never actually needed it." Without ceremony, the cup lands in front of Joseph, steam rising between them, and something in his shoulders drops half an inch. Involuntary, the kind of surrender a body gives before the mind agrees to it. "My father used to drink it exactly like this," he says. No elaboration follows. None is needed. The particular quality of a memory arriving uninvited rearranges his face for a moment before he puts it away again. He still can if he wants it. He hasn't wanted much of anything in 7 years. A pause, the kind she has learned to leave alone. "Until you." Both hands wrap around her own cup instead of answering that directly. The ceramic warm enough to notice, the kitchen quiet enough that the tick of the security monitors mounted discreetly above the pantry door reaches her. A sound stopped registering as unusual and started, this week, registering as a countdown. He watches her not answer. No pushing, which makes the silence sit heavier than a question would have. "You're not sleeping," she says finally. "Neither are you. I'm staff. Staff doesn't get to sleep when the house is like this. You stopped being staff 3 nights ago. I just haven't figured out what to call you instead." Exactly as long as it deserves, the silence gets left alone, longer than either of them is comfortable with, and neither of them fills it. "How bad is it?" she asks. "The Ashcombe situation." "Bad enough that I've moved every man I trust onto the property, and I still don't trust the number is enough." "And the tunnel?" "Sealed on our end. I had it checked twice." Setting the phone down finally, meeting her eyes fully for the first time since she walked in. "I keep telling myself that's enough." Alfred answers before she can. Neither of them heard the wheelchair approach, the carpet swallowing sound the way it swallows everything in this house, and both of them turn at once to find him in the archway, upright in the chair, eyes clearer than she has seen them since the day she started, watching his son with an expression that has nothing confused left in it at all. "It isn't," Alfred says. Joseph is on his feet before the sentence finishes. "Papa, you should be resting." "I have rested for 7 years." Still rough, still climbing out from somewhere deep, but every word lands exactly where he intends it to. "They will not use the front gate. Men with guards at a gate expect to be seen. Ashcombe does not want to be seen. They will use the door and the tunnel beneath it because they have known about it since before I was foolish enough to think locking it was the same as closing it. Nothing to do with temperature makes the room go cold." Joseph starts to argue, voice rising, something about reinforcements and timelines, and the old fear returns exactly where she left it, low and steady under her ribs, except this time it is not fear for herself. Shaped like a man's raised voice and an old man's stillness, and a door that has been waiting 7 years to matter again. The fear settles over her differently now. Basta, Alfred says. Both of them stop. Flat, certain, not a command so much as a hand laid over something that needed, finally, to stop moving. The word lands in the kitchen the way it landed in that room days ago. Joseph stares at his father like he has been struck. Something rises in her chest without a clean name for it, equal parts ache and something warmer than ache, the particular feeling of watching a word you gave someone become theirs completely. "We reinforce the tunnel tonight," Alfred says, quieter now. "Not the gate. The door." One long second, saying more than any of the words they have circled all week, passes between Joseph and Tyla before he moves, already reaching for his phone, already becoming the man the house needs him to be. Cup cooling in her hands, she stays where she is, watching the old man's eyes return to that same fixed point past the bookshelves, and a certainty settles into her like weather, that whatever this house is bracing for, it is no longer bracing for it without her. The lights go first. No warning, no flicker, just the sudden absence of every hum the tower makes without anyone noticing it makes them. The refrigerator, the monitors, the low mechanical breath of a building this size settling into darkness all at once. A silence, so complete it has a weight of its own. Then, from somewhere below the floor, faint enough that she almost convinces herself she imagined it, the unmistakable sound of something moving where nothing has moved in 7 years. No waiting for her eyes to adjust. The sound below the floor has already told her everything she needs to know, and her body moves before her mind finishes catching up, the way it always has in the moments that matter most, the ones that never give a woman time to be afraid first and useful second. "Alfred." Her voice comes out low, steady, the same voice she used the day his fist closed around her wrist. "We're moving. Now." No argument comes. That alone tells her how much has changed between them. A man who has spent 7 years refusing every instruction anyone gave him, rising from his chair at her hand on his shoulder like the two of them have done this 100 times instead of never. Not as furniture does she think of the bookshelves anymore. As the thing rearranged with her own hands 3 weeks ago, she thinks of them, and she remembers, with the particular clarity fear seems to sharpen rather than blur, that behind the third shelf from the window sits a service panel old enough to predate the tower itself, the kind of gap a house keeps the way a body keeps an old scar, forgotten by everyone except the people who go looking. Her fingers find the seam in the dark. It gives easier than it should, hinges someone oiled recently and never mentioned, and in the half-second before she pushes Alfred's chair through it, understanding arrives that Joseph must have found this same gap while she slept and prepared it without telling either of them, because that is the particular shape of the fear he has been carrying all week, quiet, precise, entirely unwilling to be caught unready twice. Inside, she gets him settled. Beside the chair she kneels in a space barely wide enough for both of them, close enough to feel his breath against her hair, and her palm presses flat over his where it curls tight again in his lap, not from confusion this time, but from something closer to the fear any person carries when the past finally arrives wearing the shape they always knew it would. "Quiet now," she whispers. "Just breathe. I've got you." Footsteps sound below them. Not many, but purposeful, moving with the particular economy of men who have done this before and expect to do it again. A door somewhere down the passage gives way, with splitting rather than breaking clean, and beneath the panel's thin wall, Alfred's whole body goes rigid, remembering a night 7 years older than this one, a night that ended with a door that should have stayed locked and a woman who never came back through it. His hand does not get released. Her face does not turn away from his, even in the dark, even when she cannot fully see it. Somewhere above them, gunfire cracks once, twice, and then a longer, uglier sound she does not let herself name, and her palm stays pressed flat against Alfred's chest the way she has learned to press it against fear itself, steady, unhurried, refusing to let either of them shake apart before the house decides which way it is going to break. Quiet arrives the way storms go quiet, all at once, more unsettling than the noise itself. To 60 she counts before trusting it. Then to 60 again. When the panel finally opens from the outside, her whole body goes still with a fear sharper than anything the dark itself gave her, until the voice on the other side reaches her and every part of her exhales at once. "It's me," Joseph says. "It's over." His hands are shaking when he helps her out, though his voice never does, and there's a tear along his shoulder she does not ask about yet, a dark stain she chooses not to look at directly, because looking at it means acknowledging how close the night came to ending differently. Beside his father he kneels instead, both hands finding the old man's face, checking him the way she imagines he used to be checked himself, once, by someone who loved him enough to be afraid. "Papa." His voice breaks on the word in a way she has not heard from him before, not even the night his father first spoke. "Papa, are you hurt?" Alfred lifts his free hand and rests it against his son's jaw, an old man's hand, steady now in a way it has not been steady in years.
"Basta," he says. Not a warning this time.
Not the sound of a fight ending before it started. Something gentler this time, something closer to a blessing, a father telling his son that whatever war has been living in this house can finally be allowed to stop asking so much of both of them. Joseph closes his eyes. When he opens them again, he looks at Tyla the way a man looks at something he has spent years convincing himself he was not allowed to want. "You could have run," he says. "When the lights went. You could have gone straight for the stairs." "I thought about it." Honesty comes easier now, the way she has been slowly learning to let it, in this house that keeps asking more of her than it should. For about a second. And then I didn't. The small distance between them he crosses, close enough now that she can feel the warmth still radiating off him from whatever violence just left his body, close enough to smell smoke and something colder underneath that she decides, for tonight, not to ask about either. His hand finds hers, not urgent, not desperate, just certain, the way a man reaches for something he has already decided he cannot afford to lose twice. "I don't want you gone," he says. Quiet. Unguarded. The first thing he has said to her all week that costs him nothing to admit, and everything to have waited this long to say. "I know that isn't fair to ask of someone I hired to change bedsheets. I'm asking anyway." No words answer him. Her fingers lace through his instead, in a hallway still dark except for the emergency lights beginning to hum back to life along the baseboards, one by one, the sound almost gentle after everything else the house has done tonight. Neither of them moves to close the last small distance still standing between them, though both of them know, standing there in the wreckage of a night neither of them will forget, breathing air that still smells of smoke and something colder underneath it, in a house that will not be fully safe again for a long time, that it is only a matter of time before one of them does. There's a kind of woman who ends up in houses like this one, taking care of people the world stopped looking at. If that's you, or if it's someone you love, you're not as alone in it as it feels. This is where we keep finding each other,